no dividends will be given out to shareholders. Would you confirm how much and when are they?
The total dividend pot is in excess of 40 million CDs. It's a payout ratio of 31.9% and a dividend yield of about 8 or 9%. And I think so far it's probably the highest that has been declared by any company for 2014. It will be paid up on 17th of April. Yeah. It's difficult, and it's going to be more difficult this year. And it's not just the CD depreciation. The thing about banks, though, is that because we have active treasury operations, if you do your job properly, you are able to cushion the depreciation against your income. But nonetheless, it also makes life very difficult. So, I mean, making profits you may make a profit. It may look big, but when you depreciate it with the factor and you look at inflation, then you may not have done as well as you did the previous year. That didn't happen to us last year. The currency depreciation was less than our rate of growth, our profitability growth. And when you discount it with inflation, we still were ahead of the curve. So it was a difficult year, but we could have done better if the macroeconomic indicators were different. I think this year is going to be even more challenging. A lot of people underestimate the effect of doomsaw. And doomsaw is now a word. You can find it in Wikipedia, so it's easy to say and everybody understands. You know, we buy, on average, 70,000 cedis worth of fuel a week. That is a significant number. And that is cost that is totally avoidable. You don't need, how many businesses can survive under such conditions, you know? And I think something needs to be done about it, and very, very quickly, because what it is banks feed off the economy. The economy is made up of businesses. So if the economic environment is such that businesses suffer and are not able to grow and make profits and generate revenue, banks do not grow. Okay? So it's very important for the economic environment as is right now to change. So then otherwise we're going to have some very, very difficult times ahead of us. You heard during the AGM that even though these difficulties exist, the bank nonetheless employed about 200 people last year. And so people are retrenching, but we are not, at least not yet. And we hope that we don't have to get there. Because we are expanding. In the midst of the difficult environment, we're still expanding. You know, and we're hoping that through 2015, 2016, this expansion and growth will continue taking place. But it's a very difficult economic environment.
Okay. When the governor of the Bank of Ghana presented the MPC, he described the banking sector as stable. But recently, we also heard from a former deputy governor of the Bank of Ghana who says, looking at the way government is borrowing from the domestic market, the banking sector is volatile. Could you tell me what you make of the projections, the banking sector? What do you make of it?
Why do you want to put me in the middle of two elephants? Excuse the pun. Look, the banking sector, the banking sector is resilient. And you have to believe what the governor says because he's got the numbers. Okay. What did you say, Dr. Baumia said?
The banking sector is volatile, considering the borrowing the government is doing from the domestic market.
Considering the borrowing the government is doing from the domestic market, I wish I haven't listened to Dr. Baumia. I've heard bits and pieces of excerpts of his speech, but there must be a link. And so until I know the link, I cannot comment fully. But the mere fact of government borrowing from the public sector does not necessarily make the banking sector volatile. If it destabilizes the banking sector, yes. Now, what I think he may be talking about is if you have a voracious appetite for cash, then you pay a high price for it. If you pay a high price for that cash, then you escalate interest rates. If you escalate interest rates, then banks have a problem because high interest rates directly lead to high default rates in loans. Okay, but until that nexus is done, I cannot connect what he's saying. I have given you a nexus based on suppositions, and so that's the only thing that I can think about, because typically every time the government borrows heavily from the market, then because it has a high need for cash, it is going to have to pay more. That feeds into pricing of loans, because if the so-called risk-free rate, which is the government paper, is at 26%, I am not going to lend you money at below 26%. I'm not going to lend you money at 26%. I'm going to lend you money at the risk-free rate of 26% plus a margin. Okay, so that is what maybe he's talking about, but otherwise I cannot.
What about the fear of default on the side of government?
We all thought that governments will not default until Portugal, Greece, Spain, etc. came along. So debt bedding, 69% of GDP, is high for a country with a 50, 60 billion dollar GDP. So but I think that it is not a hopeless case yet, and that it can be arrested simply by less misadventure and more prudent management of the economy.
Issues of interest rates. We've seen the Minister of Trade consistently hit at, I should say, banks and also microfinance institutions, demanding that they lower their interest rates. In the next 45 days, he's going to organize a forum, including the Bank of Ghana, Ministry of Finance, and his ministry, to help arrive at a consensus as to how to drive down interest rates. What do you make of that?
Dr. Spiogabra is a very good friend of mine, but he's also a politician. You cannot legislate interest rates to go down. You cannot drive down interest rates. Banks do not take up interest rates. Banks do not determine interest rates. Interest rates are a factor of the way you manage the economy. Period. He should speak to the president and the finance minister to manage the country such that your economic variables will point to lowered interest rates. If you borrow heavily from the domestic market, as we talked about, and you pay a high price for it, your interest rates are going to go up. It's as simple as that. And Dr. Spiogabra knows it.
So looking forward for Calvin. What's next?
I typically go to bed after work and I sleep. Cowbank doesn't stress me. Work doesn't stress me. If my family has a problem, it stresses me. But this year, I go to work, I go home, I sleep, and I wake up at 3 a.m. And it's simply because it's a very difficult environment. Like I said, we're spending unnecessary money on fuel. It's so annoying. It's an avoidable expense. Why must anybody spend 60, 70,000 cedis on fuel to power generators, and then your electricity bill, which you get from the grid, hasn't gone down? 4 days out of the 7 days, you provide your own electricity. You get power for only 3 days. And the 3 days you get power for, you pay more than you were paying before. That and other things. It's so difficult right now that it's 2015 is going to be a difficult year. But as we promise our shareholders, we will battle on. We'll do what we can to try and protect the value of the bank and return positive value to the shareholders.
Okay, would that be? How are you dealing with the depreciating cedi?
We manage it through the risk process, the treasury risk process. We make sure that's why I said earlier that the banks have an advantage because you have other currencies, you manage the currencies, you manage your shortages, and then through that, hopefully you equalize or you avoid losses.
Would I be pushing too hard if I pick your thoughts on the downgrades by Moody's and Fitch and how it's going to impact Ghana's floating of the $1 billion Eurobond?
Ghana will simply pay more in interest.
Should governments go ahead even?
That question you should reserve for Setekwe. The question is about my pay grade. Thank you very much.